Welcome to In the Zone. I'm your host, Theo Vela. With an action-packed final week of the college football season, the NFC West separated by 2 games, the latest in the NHL, and much more. There's a lot to cover. In the Zone starts now. Joining me on the desk this week is Grace Manley and Brad Wood. As we begin the episode with a recap on Rivalry weekend in college football, the week featured stunners, 8 overtimes, flag plantings, and brawls between Florida State and Florida, Arizona and Arizona State, and others. The big headline was the fight between the 2 most heated rivals in college football, the Michigan Wolverines and the Ohio State Buckeyes. Michigan won the game 13-10, leading to a post-game brawl, resulting in police to pepper spraying players and leading to fines distributed to both the schools. Brad, did Rivalry Week live up to your expectation?
First and foremost, Columbus police really mishandled that whole incident. I feel like way too violent, pepper spraying all the players, not mainly Michigan players, while Ohio State started the brawl. I think that should have some accountability right there. But honestly, I think really Davey had some good games, good upset. I mean, come on, the game. Michigan and Ohio State was a kind of a slow burner. Ohio State really just so slow to get really started. But, Michigan pulled off the upset. And, as a Penn State fan, got to be appreciative to Michigan because we're off to the Big Ten championship, baby. We had some good weeks. Again, good Syracuse pull off the upset right now. There's some good games overall. I had a great time. Rivalry Week. I'm excited for conference championships and for the college football playoffs.
Yeah, definitely. What about you, Grace? What did you think?
Yeah, I mean, Rivalry Week is so exciting in general. I will say I felt like a lot of it was dampened by so many brawls, but I hope it brings kind of a new conversation to light. I think there's a very hypocritical culture when it comes to athletes. I think they're built up like gods and then also meant to be humble and act perfect. And I think this is a perfect kind of result of such a toxic environment, and the amount of people that can love them is the same amount that can tear them down online. And I think it kind of shows how toxic and hard it can be for them.
I was just about to say, just let the boys play. Just let them go. I mean, obviously, Rivalry Week is a huge week in college football. So many teams that just absolutely hate each other. So much hate going on between 2 teams. It's bound to happen, One team loses, obviously Ohio State lost that game by 3 points, and they must have been frustrated, Some of the seniors coming off losing 4 games at home, 4 games in a row to Michigan. It's just brutal, I mean, obviously I understand their anger, but there's no need really for it, and especially, coming up with the college football playoff, obviously Ohio State going to be one of those big teams. Like, they're going to have some good players suspended. There's going to be players that are going to be sitting out because of the result of their actions.
Exactly, and you know what? They could have fought in the 60 minutes they were playing, but decided to do it after the game. And you can apply that to all brawls that happen. If you're not going to put the fight in the game, what's the point of doing it after, right, when you lose? You can't be a sore loser in this, but I never see... It's always a little violent. I usually see it between students, honestly, but seeing it between players, crazy work.
Yeah, for sure, definitely. With Rivalry Week ending the regular season, these games were a make or break for the teams with the potential to make their conference championships. Some teams like Michigan and Syracuse gave out losses to their rivals and opportunities to Penn State and Clemson, who now look forward to bringing a conference championship back to campus. With a full slate of ranked matchups this weekend, Gracie, who's raising the trophy, and how will these games affect the college football playoff outcomes?
I mean, honestly, to answer your question, I think a lot of it has to wait till after the Penn State and Oregon game. I think a lot is riding on that. I think I don't think it's going to be an easy matchup, and I feel like people on both sides think it's going to be a clean sweep, and I've seen a lot of different reactions. I think it's going to be a fight till the very end, and I'm very excited to see that one. In terms of Big 12, I don't really know. I'm honestly focusing most on Big 10, and Really excited for Penn State.
Yeah, obviously there's absolutely so many opportunities here and so many teams to just win out a couple of games, win a game or two, and you obviously find yourself almost hosting a college football playoff. SMU being that 4th seed, like right now having that bye, like a team like that you would never really expect to be going far in such a very, very talented college football playoff field. And obviously it's going to be a test for Penn State. It's going to be a real test for them. Obviously losing to Ohio State this year, again, death taxes and losing to Ohio State. But it's just going to be a real test for them. Obviously, Oregon being their first season in the Big Ten, like that's also a huge part of it too. Like nobody really expected them to come out and absolutely dominate the Big Ten in their first year, pretty much having an undefeated season and just absolutely just raking teams such as Michigan, obviously. But it's going to be really exciting. I'm super excited for all these teams to come out. I'm also really excited for the Mountain West Championship between Boise State and UNLV. UNLV making a first conference championships all the way back since 1993, 94. So UNLV, another big up-and-coming football school for sure. But yeah, for sure, I'm really excited for this.
I mean, big up-and-coming school as well. I mean, not just UNLV, but also hockey as well, with college hockey. They're actually not too bad as well. But I think it's Boise State's to win, honestly. I think gotten back. But y'all didn't even mention, though, the SEG's championship. We got Texas and Georgia, I believe.
Yeah,
I mean, big game. I would like to say Texas is going to do the upset, but, like, once again, sometimes they'd be playing down opponents a little bit. And Georgia, they're not to be slept with at all. They're Georgia, after all, even though it's been a weaker year for them, right? I think they still got it. But the Big Ten championship, I mean, God, here's my thing, though. Oregon has such a high-power offense, could really get it going, break defense. It really depends on that first half. If Penn State can limit Oregon to, let's say, 21 points, maybe 14 in the first half, I think they have a fighting chance because they are a fourth-quarter team.
Yep, going to be a real test for Penn State coming up. Now transitioning to the NFL, we take a look at the standings as playoff implications begin to weigh on the teams. In the NFC conference, teams like the Lions and Eagles are comfortably sitting atop the conference, looking towards January football. But in the NFC West, with their records separated by 2 games, it's looking like the only winner of the division will find a playoff spot. At the moment, the Seattle Seahawks hold the top spot above the Cardinals and Rams, who are behind by 1 game. Brad, can my Seattle Seahawks hold on to the lead?
You know what? It really depends on that coaching, though, because Lord have mercy, how many times, not just this year, but last year, they played down to competition. Defense, that secondary, man, you have some nice young pieces that you really mold into great players and arguably a top 5 defense. But guess what? Time after time, week after week, absolutely failures on the Seahawks' part. Do I see this division trash, right? I mean, 49, we got the 49ers in there. Injured the hell and back. Not going to be good for them. Rams are kind of sneaky one. And then you have the Cardinals, which, they have somewhat decent defense, but I don't trust them. It's going to be the bottom of the barrel. And I see the Seahawks choking. I'm not going to lie. I feel like the Cardinals will have a good shot, in my opinion, because they've been kind of sneaky. Low-key, no one's really talking about them. But the Seahawks, they played out the competition every week.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. Obviously, losing a couple of games early, such as losing to the Giants, kind of, took one in the chest there, took one in the stomach, in the gut. But I mean, it's going to be exciting. I mean, obviously they played the 49ers twice already. They're 1-1 against them, and they've lost to the Rams, but they beat the Cardinals. So they have obviously the Rams both and the Cardinals once again. But it's going to be really interesting to see how this turns out. Obviously, the 49ers losing Christian McCaffrey is a huge loss to them again. The man made of paper skin and glass bones, like almost every running back. I'm surprised Saquon Barkley hasn't gotten hurt. Sorry, Eagles fans, unfortunately. But yeah, it's going to be really interesting. I really do think that, I mean, anything could possibly happen. The Seahawks could lose out, and if it's not the Seahawks, I would say it's going to be the Rams for sure. As much as I don't like them, I do think Sean McVay is an amazing coach, and I think Drew Stafford can lead that team to somewhat of maybe a tight playoff spot, maybe sneak in there, but it's going to be interesting to see how the NFC West turns out for sure. In a game where we all expected offenses to be firing on all cylinders, the Philadelphia Eagles and the Baltimore Ravens' defense showed up and kept it contested for all 4 quarters. A game of missed and made opportunities was the difference in this anticipated NFC-AFC matchup, where the Eagles were able to run out the fourth quarter and win 24-19 on the road, extending their win streak to 8 games as they look forward to the bout against the Carolina Panthers. The Ravens enter the bye week on the hot seat after this performance. Gracie, what do you think the next step for the Baltimore Ravens is? And do you think Saquon will carry his momentum, maybe even towards an MVP?
I mean, honestly, I think for the Baltimore Ravens, they have to just keep fighting. I think they're a very kind of, I'm going to say, stepped-on team. I think they can have a few losses, and then people will say they're done for the season. I think it would be foolish for anyone to kind of underrate them and undermine them. I think they need to take a loss as a lesson, and I think the best teams in the past have. They take it, they learn what they have to train and do for it, and I think I've seen teams, not to name them, but teams in the past that kind of take it more as something to be angry about than to really learn from their mistakes, and I think the Ravens have a good team and a good coaching team to really help them through that. In terms of Saquon Barkley, I fully believe it. I think if he is not to be considered in the top 3 when it comes to it, it's foolish. I think he is incredible. He is, especially for a running back. I mean, he's just show-stopping this season, and as an Eagles fan, he's who I'm looking for every game.
Yeah, most definitely. Obviously, Brad, I do think he's definitely in the top MVP conversation for sure. I mean, I would never expect the Eagles to run the ball, considering they have a running back for a quarterback. But I mean, it's going to be interesting to see. Obviously, running backs right now is they're very tough to tell because of injuries and injury proneness. But I do think Saquon has a very, very big weight on his shoulders coming up with these final games of the season.
I'll say this. Running backs historically have been snubbed time and time again for the MVP. I think I would love to see Barkley win, not because he's a great player, stats, absolutely crazy what he's doing on the field, but morely for running backs. They're taking a hit, both like you see in free agency, right? Teams are wanting to pay them less, taking hits. They're not as well respected as they used to be. So him can pull out, first year on a new team with a decent O-line and win the MVP. I think that would do wonders, not just for him, but for running backs as well. As for the Ravens, call me foolish, but I'll look down at them, damn, I can't take them seriously at all. If you cannot win big games, if you can time and time again, both in the the playoffs, regular season, I don't care. Tucker, there's got to be compensation to have for him. I almost picked him on fantasy, right? But time and time again, botched field goals. I don't get it. I think arguably he's going to be one of the best kickers of all time. His leg is crazy, but this season, you could get a cheap kicker on the market that could probably do better than him. Especially for the postseason, the Ravens do not want to go and lose a playoff game on his leg. Exactly.
And I mean, obviously the Ravens pretty much, as of right now, being 0-3 in those big games, which that being the Chiefs, the Eagles, and the Steelers. It's tough to judge them where they are now, considering the semi-shaky start that they have, starting 0-2, then winning 2-3 in a row. It's just going to be tough to tell for a team like that. Obviously, Lamar Jackson and some of these receivers need to step up their game. They really need to, start asking themselves the big questions. Start looking themselves in the mirror and figuring out what their identity is going into these last 4 or 5 games of the season. But it's going to be interesting to see. Obviously, the defense is very good. They're heavily relied on in certain situations. But I think it's going to be very interesting to see what the Baltimore Ravens can do. Mm-hmm. We'll now send it over to Nicole Dalton for the latest in Marauder athletics. Nicole?
As the semester wraps up, Millersville Athletics has been having a strong past 2 weeks, including Morgan Yannick going to the cross-country NCAA D2 championship in California. Yannick is the 10th Marauder to compete in this race since the late 1980s and the first to qualify since 2010. She had a time of 22 minutes, 32 seconds, and 6 milliseconds. Women's basketball also traveled, where they went to Puerto Rico over Thanksgiving break to play 2 of their local teams. The Marauders won both games and had a great time playing, as well as exploring the culture around. Before break, they also won against Cal U and Slippery Rock. I hope you all have a great rest of the semester as finals begin next week. Now back to Theo for an update on the ice. Theo?
Thanks, Nikki, with that update on Ville Sports. The National Hockey League is almost a third of the way through its 2024-2025 seasons. Teams such as the Toronto Maple Leafs, Washington Capitals, the Las Vegas Golden Knights, and the Minnesota Wild all lead their respective divisions by a minuscule margin of just under 2 points. But last night, the Columbus Blue Jackets traveled to Calgary to face the Flames, and what was an emotional return for the Jackets as the Gaudreau family returned to the Scotiabank Saddledome for the first time since losing Johnny Gaudreau and Matthew Gaudreau. Johnny Hockey was a staple for Calgary Flames hockey for almost 9 seasons, where he scored 213 goals and had 399 assists. Both teams took warm-ups wearing number 13 and the Gaudreau last name on the sweaters. The Gaudreau family was invited to the ceremonial puck drop before the game, where the family received a standing ovation and a candlelight vigil. The Flames ended up being victorious that night, winning the competition 3-0. Brad and Gracie, how's the NHL season been so far? I know we have not touched on this. First time in the year of In the Zone. So, how are you guys feeling about it?
You know, very, really good. You got some good games, very, very close. I mean, my Islanders all the way down, last in Metropolitan Division, we're only 2 points away from a playoff spot. That's how tight a lot of these divisions are. And I'm expecting a lot of changes in a lot of division races, right? A lot of questions, you know, trade deadline, looming around, like teams like we talked about before the show, the Rangers, what's
Yep.
next for them? And there's like other competing teams as well. But again, what I'm excited for, Toronto's doing good. Again, make it to playoffs. But I am looking at Las Vegas, though. They
Yeah.
have really surprised me. I expect them to have a big kind of drop off a little bit, at least kind of be in the middle of the pack. But no, they're competing fairly well, very convincingly. I think goalie is still a big issue for them, but like honestly, if they can get squared away on that, I think they could win the cup, honestly, because I feel like a lot of strong teams before, like the Avalanche, for example, fell off. You
Yeah,
lose a
they've
lot
been
of
struggling. Yeah, for
lose
sure.
a lot of talent with the cup tax. That's kind of how it goes. So
Yeah.
I think it's very interesting, very tight. Each game matters, and that's why hockey is one of the best sports.
Yeah, for real, you don't know who's gonna win or lose at any given night. Basically, obviously, teams like the Washington Capitals coming out and just dominating the Metro. Obviously, Alexander Ovechkin, their captain, pretty much breaking his leg, unfortunately, in unfortunate circumstances, was leading the league in goals as a 39-year-old with 26. I'm pretty sure it was 26 goals. He's on pace to have a 63-goal season. He only needs 36 more goals to overtake Wayne Gretzky in all-time goals record of the NHL. And, you know, just the way that Spencer Carberry, their head coach, is treating this team and the way that they're treating the locker room environment, it's unbelievable. It's an unreal team. And obviously teams like the Minnesota Wild, too, who are coming out and having an unbelievable season, too. Teams like the Jets coming off their first-round loss last year in the playoffs against the Dallas Stars. Like, they're obviously going to be They're going to be dogs. They're going to be workhorses. They're going to take the hits. They're going to get in the dirty areas. They're going to do all the good stuff that needed to win. And you know, I wouldn't say there's not a lot of bad teams, but there's a lot of teams where they're just on the they're just getting over that margin, getting over that benchmarks. Teams such as the Philadelphia Flyers.
Yeah.
Obviously, the Flyers are not as bad as they seem on paper. They have a really, really good, strong young core, and obviously Matvei Michkov I believe is going to be the Rookie of the Year this year, scoring 4 game-winning goals this year already, and basically propelling their team and bringing that energy to the locker room, some young energy that they needed. But yeah, that's a great team. So what do you think about the Flyers, Gracie?
As a Flyers fan, it's been an up and down season. I mean, I think they've definitely shown out more than they have last season, especially. And with them, they're a pure Philly team. Even when they do win and when they do lose, they do it tightly. It's not a close game. And it's stressful. And in every game, I've been on the edge of my seat this year. But I do believe they have shown a lot more fight and a lot more hope. And finding out that he was only 19, my goodness, he is pure talent and a force to be reckoned with. And I think if we continue to mold him and work with him, I think we have some promising future.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously, like you said before, Brad, the Metropolitan Division being super, super tight. Obviously, the Islanders are last place in that division, but they still have an over 500 record. They're right there with all these other teams. You know, obviously teams like the New York Rangers are struggling. They've lost 6 of their last 7 games, and obviously as being a huge Rangers fan, growing up with that, like it's very sad to see. And they're going to be selling and shopping some of their best players in the draft, the trade deadline, such as Chris Kreider, and maybe even some guys like Jacob Trouba, who the captain is. It's going to be an interesting trade deadline for a bunch of teams for sure. And you're going to see teams like, obviously, like the Minnesota Wild, teams obviously like the Washington Capitals, seeing what their record is doing and seeing what they can do right now and going out and shopping for some of these big players, big names to get them over that hump to win maybe a playoff series or two. And it's going to be, I think it's going to be a great season. And I know this isn't added before, but really quickly, instead of the All-Star game this year, the Four Nations face-off is happening between the best four international teams, such as USA, Canada, Finland, and Sweden. It's going to be amazing. I'm super excited for it.
I think it really needed a good refresh to All-Star. I think that was one of the weak points of the NHL, the All-Star game, All-Star weekend. Always been a little bummer. So, but hey, I'm excited. Hockey's still going forward, and we have a lot in store.
Yep. Last but not least, the Formula One season is wrapping up its 24-race calendar year this Sunday with the final race taking place at the Yas Marina circuit in Abu Dhabi. Red Bull Racing driver Max Verstappen secured the Drivers' Championship 2 weeks ago under the lights of the Las Vegas Street Circus. There is still a lot to drive for in this final race of the season, as second position in the Drivers' Championship is still up for grabs between Lando Norris and Charles Leclerc. The two are only separated by 9 points in the championship with one race to go. The Constructors' Championship is also up for the taking, with McLaren and Ferrari still taking the battle to the final race of the season. This season has been one to watch for and still a lot to race for in the final Grand Prix weekend of 2024. Guys, maybe you're not, maybe too in-depth about Formula One, but I for sure am, and this season has been exciting for sure. Obviously, 6 different Grand Prix winners this year, which is the most since 2012, I believe, with the top 3 teams, McLaren, Red Bull, Ferrari, and even Mercedes. All of these drivers are winning races. I don't even say 8 different drivers won this year. And it's been a crazy season. Obviously, Verstappen winning 8 races leading up to Las Vegas and securing that championship under the lights, under the street circuit, and on the Las Vegas Strip. It was a great season, and obviously still a lot to come for in this final race.
And I have to agree. Contenders Championship, though, look at a Red Bull, absolute drop-off. I felt like in the beginning half of the season, the way they're modifying their car, absolutely not good. I think they suffered for it a little bit, but I think they made some good modifications towards the middle of the season, really pushed them for the way. Verstappen, again, no championship. What you look at that, honestly. Lando Norris, so not a bad year for him. No matter where he stands at the end of this race.
Yeah,
I
for
think
sure.
something for him and also McLaren to be proud of. They're fighting for that Contenders Championship between Ferrari, and I've been saying this since day one. I think McLaren has the best car. I think they've been pushing through, really been a great team. I think they're going to take it at Abu Dhabi.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a great final race of the season for sure. Obviously, the Constructors' Championship is a huge part because, winning, say, maybe first place and second place is a huge chunk of money. Like, teams that finish first, like, they're going to obviously get massive amounts of money for next year. But fighting for first and second is basically, I'm going to say almost close to $20 to $30 million per team. Mm-hmm. Like, this is riding a lot on both drivers. Obviously, Lando Norris and Charles Leclerc. Both of them unbelievable drivers this season, each of them winning at least 2 races this year. It's going to be an awesome challenge, and I think the final race of the season is going to be amazing. Gracie, what do you think?
Yeah, I was really never familiar with F1 before this season. I would say it's mostly Red Bull that's caught my attention, but I honestly didn't expect it to be as thrilling as it is. And I really say Red Bull, but I feel like that's an unpopular opinion overall.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, Red Bull is suffering so many setbacks this year. I mean, especially with Sergio Checo Perez not being able to fight, maybe even in the top 10 of the Drivers' Championships. Mm-hmm. He's not even, in there. He's not even up there. Barely making out of qualifying 1 and barely even making out of qualifying 2 every single race weekend. It's, I would never see them win it. They're obviously not gonna win the Constructors' Championship this weekend. I do believe McLaren is gonna pull out in front. Obviously, Lando Norris winning 2 races this year, and Oscar Piastri as well winning 2 races. Both drivers winning their first races of their careers in this season. They have a lot to race for, and obviously coming up with next season, they need that money, and if they get that money from first place, it's going to be huge for them, and obviously fighting for that Drivers' Championship. And I think, this last race in Abu Dhabi and Yas Marina it's going to be huge. And obviously to final it out, it's going to be Lewis Hamilton's final race for Mercedes after I believe it is 10 years of racing for Mercedes, winning obviously 6 drivers' championships, with that team, and 7 constructors' championships. They're suffering a huge loss there, and obviously the way Lewis is, he's an unbelievable racer, an unbelievable human being and character. It's going to be a huge loss for them, not even on the racetrack, but off the racetrack, in the team garages, back at the factories. It's going to be a big loss for them. And, George Russell is going to be carrying on that seat. He's going to become that #1 driver next year. He's coming off that win in Las Vegas. And I do think George Russell is going to win the last race of the year this year.
I think he's been doing very well, especially towards the end of the race. I feel like he is arguably the best fit to replace Hamilton as well. I think there's some good young talent at F1 that could take the seats. Hamilton going to Ferrari, I'm happy to see it. I know
it's going to be pretty.
Oh, man.
It's going to be crazy to see him wearing red overalls next year, considering him fighting against these Ferraris for basically about 17, 18 years. He's been in Formula One, like pretty much. He has 104 pole positions. He has close to almost 100 race wins. He overtook, I believe it was, don't correct me if I'm wrong, but he overtook Juan Manuel Fangio in taking over most race wins of all time. Could be wrong there, but I believe it was Juan Manuel Fangio or Michael Schumacher, excuse me. Duh. Who could forget about who could forget about the Ferrari, the legend, the absolute GOAT in Formula One? But I do think next year is going to be a huge shakeup for the drivers, and obviously the constructors finishing out this year is going to be crazy. But I'm very, very excited for this last race. You can watch it on ESPN at 5 in the morning on Sunday, which I don't expect a lot of you to watch, but I will be watching. So that'll do it for the last episode of the Fall 2024 semester. From Brad Wood, Gracie Manley, Nicole Dalton, and the entire In the Zone crew, I'm your host, Theo Vela. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to tune in after the new year right here on In the Zone.